All right, we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining today's presentation on the community eligibility provision. So this will just be an overview of this non-pricing meal service. Community eligibility provision, you'll hear me call it CEP throughout the presentation. So for just an overview of today's presentation, we'll be talking about the benefits and the challenges of CEP, the procedures, so we'll talk about notification requirements, the application process itself, the policy statement, and then the 4-year cycle and exiting CEP. And then we'll also talk about some best practices in outreach when participating in CEP. And just as a little background, right now we only have 2 districts that participate in CEP. So anybody else that's interested after this presentation, always feel free to reach out for additional questions as well. So here are some definitions and acronyms that I'll be going over throughout the presentation. So direct certification, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this. So this is just determining a child for free meals based on documentation provided by state or local agencies. So these are for your kiddos that are certified under SNAP or TANF. And then also those children that are foster child, homeless, migrant, Head Start, or runaway. And then you also be hearing me saying identified students, and these are the students that are approved for those free meals based on that documentation. So it's really those students that are directly certified by those programs like SNAP or TANF, or those local level certifications. So those homeless, migrant, runaway, foster kiddos that your local homeless liaison or other program official will determine. And just to reiterate, I know we say this a lot, Medicaid is not applicable in New Hampshire. Some other states can certify children with this, but in New Hampshire, you cannot certify children for meal benefits under Medicaid. And you'll also hear me talk about the identified student percentage, or the ISP. So this is the percent of your identified students divided by your total enrollment for your school. So that's how you get that ISP. And then LEA, just local education agency or your district. So what is CEP? So CEP is a non-pricing meal service options for schools and school districts that are in low-income areas. So schools that adopt CEP are reimbursed using a formula based on the percentage of students categorically eligible for free meals based on their participation in programs like SNAP or TANF. And then LEAs that elect CEP are in there for a 4-year cycle. If you can always exit during the cycle if that better suits you, but it is a 4-year cycle. So what makes CEP different? So traditional school meal programs require schools to determine each student's eligibility for free and reduced price meals through those applications. And CEP relies solely on data matching with other assistance programs like SNAP and TANF. And this removes the burden of processing free and reduced household income applications and the need to collect money from these students and households. So CEP really benefits everyone, the students, the parents, and the schools. So for students, they're getting free breakfast and lunch. It improves the learning environment, and there's no lunch shaming or any stigma around lunch. And for parents, they don't have to fill out those individual household income applications. There's no need to refill meal counts, and they have assurance that their child has access to nutritious meals. And for schools, it's less paperwork and administrative costs. There's no unpaid meal charges. It streamlines meal service operation, and it has the potential to increase revenues and to increase participation in your meal program. So with benefits, there always are some challenges. So now we'll go over some of the CEP challenges. So implementation challenges. So the district or the school might have a loss of individual meal benefit information that's used for educational funding. So that free and reduced percentages that's tied to your Title I funding. So the schools can use an alternate income form, and this can be collected by the LEA for this educational funding information, but food service cannot be involved in the collection of an alternate income form. So that alternate form should clearly state that it's not a school meals application and the reason why you're collecting this data and why it's important for the schools and the students. So our department does have a template for an alternate income form. I believe it is linked at the end of this presentation, but if anybody wants to look at that, you can just send me an email. I can send you a copy of it. And again, just to reiterate, these alternate income applications are not school meal applications, and the cost associated with collecting household income information for CEP schools, it cannot be charged to the nonprofit school food service account. So just some challenges continued. Their ISP may not be high enough for the reimbursement to offset the cost of providing free meals to all students. And non-federal funds from the district must be used to cover the cost of serving all students meals at no charge. So the SFA really needs to be financially viable before they can elect into CEP. And SNAP and direct certification rates might not be checked frequently in the year prior to election to maximize that ISP and the reimbursements. This typically isn't a problem for New Hampshire schools. I feel like all of the schools in New Hampshire are very good at running that direct certification list once a month. So that should not be an issue. So now we'll move on to CEP eligibility. So here is the eligibility criteria to apply for CEP. So schools, groups of schools, and LEAs with a minimum identified student percentage at ISP of at least 25% as of April 1st of the school year prior to implementing CEP are eligible to apply. You have to participate in or agree to participate in the National School Lunch Program and Breakfast Program for that 4-year cycle. And you have to have a record of administrating the meal program in accordance with program regulations that's indicated by your most recent administrative review. So as long as you're in compliance and you meet the criteria to apply, you're eligible to apply. So grouping of schools, this can be a flexible characteristic of CEP, and it can be used to maximize federal reimbursements. So LEAs can group school sites and calculate the ISP for the group using the combined enrollment and total number of identified students. So the ISP for the group must be at least 25%. Individual sites do not have to have an ISP requirement when they're grouped. And I have an example of this on the next slide to make a little bit more sense. So here's just an example of grouping of 3 schools. So as you can see, School 1 has a very high ISP, School 2 has a moderate ISP, but School 3 alone would not qualify to apply for CEP. But when grouped together, their ISP is 34.64. So this grouping of schools would qualify to apply for CEP together. And here's just another example. You can see that it's the total identified students for the group divided by the total enrollment for the group. And that's how that ISP is calculated. And here's just another example of 5 schools, some with very high ISPs, some with moderate, and then 1 school that does not meet that 25%. But when grouped together, you get 37.37% of a decent ISP for this grouping of schools. And now we'll move on to counting and claiming. And just to go back to the grouping isn't required. You can do an individual school. You can do multiple individual schools. Grouping is just a way to maximize that ISP. So for free and paid percentages, that ISP is multiplied by a factor of 1.6 to determine the percent of total meals served that will be reimbursed at the federal free rate. And that 1.6 multiplier is set by USDA. That's not something that changes. And this just approximately estimates the free and reduced percentage if household income applications were collected by the SFA. So that remaining percent of total meals is reimbursed at the federal paid rate. And when you're claiming, the percentages are rounded down to 2 decimal points. And then again, the difference in costs must be covered by the LEA or the school that's using those non-federal funding sources. So is CEP expensive to operate? So CEP is really designed to be financially viable for schools and districts in high poverty communities with high proportions of free and reduced price eligible students that participate in need-based programs. So that's those SNAP and TANF programs. USDA highly encourages schools to determine the cost of operating CEP by taking into account their ISP number, expected participation, and if all meals are offered at no cost, and the availability of non-federal funding sources. So the school or grouping of schools with an ISP of at least 62.5%, so this is just an example, will have all meals reimbursed at the federal free rate. So ISP of 62.5 times that 1.6 multiplier, So that's how you get that 100% meals reimbursed at the free rate. USDA does have an estimator tool that I linked in the slides, which I will send out after the presentation. You can use this estimator tool just to see where your ISP is at. We have data from last school year posted on our website that you can use as an estimator, and you can kind of see what your cost would be if you were to elect CEP with that ISP. So non-federal funds. Again, non-federal funds must be used when the total level of federal assistance, so those meal reimbursements received, is less than the cost of providing all students free meals. So some examples of these funding sources include state or local funds, in-kind donations, and non-federal grants. So now we'll talk about the procedures and the application process. So here are some important dates. So April 1st is when the minimum ISP must be established by your LEA for determining eligibility for CEP. And then by April 15th, our office will send out a list of the qualifying schools and districts that are eligible or near eligible to apply for CEP. So sometimes your ISP on the documentation that we send out will be near 25%, and you might be able to bump it up to 25% given any students that might be homeless, migrant, runaway, or foster that aren't currently on the direct certification list. So any students that you can get from the homeless liaison that are identified as homeless or anything like that might be able to bump you up a couple percentages, which we will find out during the application process. And then by June 30th, so May 1st is when we have to get that data out to you, but we'll typically do it in the beginning of April. And then by June 30th, any schools or districts or grouping of schools that want to apply for CEP must apply by June 30th. And that's for the following school year. So the application process. So eligible LEAs must meet at least one of the following criteria to formally apply for CEP for the 26-27 school year. So LEAs that are electing CEP for the first time, LEAs in the mid-cycle of CEP, and then LEAs that are currently in the year 4 of their CEP cycle with an ISP greater than or equal to 25 and would like to start a new 4-year cycle. So if there are any LEAs currently in their 4th year of CEP with a new calculated ISP greater than or equal to 15%, but less than 25% are eligible for 1 grace year based on their ISP as of April 1st, 2026 in year 4 of their current 4-year cycle. And just to note, LEAs that reach the required 25% threshold as of April 1st of the grace year are eligible to begin a new 4-year cycle in the following school year. So the application process includes submitting 3 required documents that are listed on this slide. So the CEP participation worksheet, and I'll have examples of these on the next couple of slides. A master student enrollment file you'll have to send to our office, and just anything with student data has to be sent via an encrypted email. So always reach out to our office first. We can send you an encrypted email link, and then you can respond back to that just to protect that data. And then you also need to submit a CEP student identification list. And I linked the application materials here. We'll send out an email with the application materials as well. Always reach out to our office if you're interested, and we can help you find the required application materials. So this is just an example of the CEP participation worksheet from a few years ago. It's still the same. So you'll see as an example, there's 3 schools entered in here. You put the identified students in there, the enrollment, and then it will calculate the ISP for each school. And this is for a group of schools. And you can see that their free claiming percentage is 66.67%. So that's that ISP times 1.6, that multiplier. And then their paid claiming percentage for this group is 33.33%. And then here's just another example for an individual school site for the participation worksheet. As you can see, it's just one school. They have their identified students in there, their enrollment. And this school, because they have 62.5% as their ISP, they're getting all their meals claimed at the free rate. And now we'll go more into the 4-year cycle. So the ISP is not required to be recalculated every year, but LEAs must continue to data match SNAP records in student enrollment. So the ISP can be adjusted each year if it benefits the school or the district based on April 1st data. So the LEA should contact our office to confirm the higher ISP and follow the steps to begin a new cycle. And again, like I mentioned earlier, a grace year or a 5th year is available to LEAs or districts in year 4 with an ISP that's less than 25%, but it's greater than or equal to 15%. And LEAs or schools may return to standard counting and claiming at any time during the school year if that better suits them. So the ISP may need to be recalculated before the 4-year cycle is complete if there are any changes in attendance boundaries, addition or departure of school sites. And if there are any unanticipated mid-year population changes, the ISP recalculation may be deferred until the following school year. So for record keeping, districts that are elect to participate in CEP must retain implementation records for each of the participating schools for the current year plus 3 fiscal years after the submission of the last monthly claim for reimbursement. And then any audit findings that may require more than 3-year record retention, our office would notify you of that. And if the LEA or school site is unable to maintain sufficient records, the state agency may require the school to return to standard meal counting and claiming procedures and or take fiscal action if we deem that necessary. So what records exactly need to be kept on file if you are participating in CEP? So the data used to collect your ISP, the annual selection of ISP, the total number of breakfasts and lunches that are served daily, the percentages used to claim meal reimbursement, what non-federal funding sources that are being used to cover any excess meal costs, school level information provided to the state agency for publication if that's applicable, and then any data used to establish a new cycle for CEP must also be available for review upon request. So exiting CEP. LEAs and sites can go back to standard notification, certification, and counting and claiming procedures at any time during the school year or for the following school year if standard procedures better suit that school program's needs. LEAs that restore standard counting and claiming during the school year are required to offer students reimbursable free meals for a period of at least 30 operating days following the date of restoration of standard procedures or until new eligibility determination is made, so whichever one of those comes first. And again, if you're participating in CEP and this comes up, always notify our office and seek guidance. Will help make this transition as seamless as possible for the students and for you guys. So if you have any students transferring from a provision to school to a standard counting and claiming school, so these guidelines that I'll go over apply within and between different districts. So students that transfer from a provision school, so a CEP school, must receive free meals for up to 10 days or until a new eligibility determination is made, so whichever one of those comes first. LEAs may permit children transferring from provision schools to receive free meals up to 30 days, and just make sure you check with our office before doing that, and we'll give you the go on that. And then free meals served under these circumstances may be claimed at the federal free rate. And we did have a school last year or a few years ago come off mid-year, and this is the way that we did it. We did the 30 days that they received free meals and they had a seamless transition off of CEP. So CEP outreach. So here are some key stakeholders and partners. So your Board of Education, your school committee meetings, your school administrators, your school food service staff, any parents, state agencies, and then your state legislator as well. So how to promote CEP, you can promote through PTO or PTA meetings on your website, any social media pages that your district has, and then any booths or at school events, you can always promote CEP as well. And I linked some resources in the slides that, again, I'll be sending out. There's a page from USDA and a page directly linked to our website. And again, any questions that pop up, feel free to send me an email or anybody on our team an email. And thank you guys for listening. If you have any other questions, I'll stay on for a little bit and see if there's any questions in the Q&A. The chat doesn't work, so make sure if you have any questions, you put them in the Q&A box. Or if you're not comfortable asking, you can always send me an email. But if there are no questions, I'll hang out here for a few more minutes. But everybody have a great day.